This presentation will provide you with information that you can use to create your own ergonomics program to reduce soft tissue injuries among the construction workers that you employ. This contractor program is available to download as a PowerPoint and in shorter video segments on the Best Built Plans Contractor Training Program page. This contractor program is part of the Best Built Plans program, which includes resources to help you plan and train for safe materials handling at each phase of your project to reduce the risk for soft tissue injuries. Let's begin. This presentation is intended to answer 3 questions. Why do contractors need an ergonomics program? What do management and workers need to know about ergonomics? And how can ergonomics be integrated into a company's safety program? During this presentation, we will also introduce you to the Best Built Plans program that has resources to help you plan for and train your employees on how to prevent soft tissue injuries. Before discussing why a company should develop an ergonomics program, it is important to understand that ergonomics is the science that reduces the risks associated with soft tissue injuries. And soft tissue injuries include sprain, strain, and overexertion injuries, and are also referred to as musculoskeletal disorders, or MSDs. So why is it in a contractor's interest to develop an ergonomics program to prevent soft tissue injuries? The simple answer is because these types of injuries are common and costly. They account for 27% of all non-fatal injuries in the industry. Construction workers have a 21% lifetime risk of experiencing a soft tissue injury, and many more workers suffer from chronic pain related to this type of injury, even though they do not have a recordable injury. Since soft tissue injuries are relatively common, it is not surprising that they are also costly. Soft tissue injuries have been reported to cost the U.S. construction industry billions of dollars each year. In 2021 alone, these injuries cost the industry $2.21 billion, according to Liberty Mutual's Workplace Safety Index. If we look at one example, a single injury claim for $50,000 can actually cost an employer $127,000 and require an employer with a 5% profit margin to generate an additional $2.5 million to cover the cost of the injury. Soft tissue injuries can severely impact a worker's productivity during work and careers and reduce quality of life in retirement. What is the impact of the physically demanding work? We call this graphic the pain train. Reading the graphic from left to right, the first picture recognizes that construction work is physically demanding. This leads to high rates of injury and chronic pain, as shown in the second picture. Many of these workers go to the doctor to seek treatment for their injuries and pain, even among the very young workers. Many of these workers are commonly prescribed opioids. Many construction workers do not get paid sick leave and have poor job security. So workers continue to work even while they're in pain, and they may work while under the influence of opioids. The treatment for these painful injuries with prescription opioid medication is a more recent and related concern and a growing problem. There is new evidence that even short-term opioid use can lead to an opioid dependency or addiction. According to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, 1 out of 4 people prescribed opioids for long-term pain become addicted. This addiction is costly and more costly for the construction industry than other industries. Using a substance use calculator, we calculated the cost a contractor with 100 employees in Missouri would pay for lost time, job turnover and retraining, and healthcare, and found it is higher for an employer in agriculture or transportation. These costs reduce your overall profit. In addition, the construction workforce is aging. In 1985, 25% of the workforce was between 45 and 64 years of age. But by 2015, this older group accounted for 40% of all workers. In 2012, a study by CPWR's Data Center showed that 40% of construction workers over the age of 50 suffered from low back pain, and the pain was higher among those workers who had worked in the industry for more than 5 years. A more recent CPWR study found that soft tissue injuries, referred to as MSDs in the top chart, are more common among older workers. They are also more common among those with more than 5 years working in construction. As noted earlier, the pain from these injuries can reduce a worker's productivity during work, shorten their career, and negatively impact their quality of life while working and in retirement. Compared to younger workers, older workers also suffer from more comorbidities. In other words, other diseases or conditions that a person may have at the same time. As the second chart shows, more older workers also suffer from heart disease, hypertension, and diabetes than younger workers, but fewer suffer from obesity. Construction workers also suffer from physical stress and fatigue, which impacts their productivity during work. This slide shows an example of a poor work layout. The blue line indicates the path a worker would have to travel to retrieve their materials and equipment in order to move to a location where it will be installed. This spaghetti chart is a visual way to see wasted motions that likely increase fatigue and decrease productivity. Ergonomics is focused on reducing hazards and excess physical demands on workers. One common description is to make the demands of the job fit within the worker's abilities, because excessive demands will tear their bodies down over time. Limiting extra motions will help reduce physical demands and allow your employees to work smarter, not harder, when moving materials. To improve your project layout, consider drawing a spaghetti chart with your project layout and asking your employees if there's a better way to locate materials closer to where they will be installed. While many companies have excellent safety programs that they have spent a long time building and modifying, most of those programs do not cover ergonomics. Yet ergonomics is intended to address the large number of costly soft tissue injuries that occur in the workforce. Generally, contractors or project managers determine what equipment will be available for workers to use on projects and then expect the foreman to make it work. While some contractors do a great job of assessing ergonomic hazards as part of their job hazard analysis, including their workers in the process, and providing the necessary equipment for workers, they often do not do it consistently for all of their projects. From the worker perspective, they rely on their employer to provide the best equipment and training to prevent soft tissue injuries, but contractors may face challenges to make that happen. So getting back to the question about why contractors need an ergonomics program, the answer is that a well-designed and implemented program can help them reduce costly injuries and improve productivity. So how do soft tissue injuries, which include sprain, strain, and overexertion injuries, and are also known as musculoskeletal disorders, develop? These injuries occur when different soft tissues of your body, such as your muscles, nerves, bones, and connective tissues like tendons and ligaments, are damaged. The injuries develop gradually over time because the tissues are damaged daily by heavy workloads. This damage accumulates in the tissues, eventually causing the damaged tissues to fail. The injury may seem to be a sudden event, such as an incident of low back pain. The tasks or equipment that caused that injury may be the same activity that caused the tissue damage in the past, but not always. This is important to consider if you use past injury records to figure out how to change the way work is done. The damaged tissue often becomes chronic or persistent, which means it lasts for a long time and possibly the rest of a worker's life. In the low back, the damage occurs in the joint and disc. The soft disc is a cushion between each bone, shown as green in the lower center photo. When the body bends forward, the disc or jelly center pushes backwards and may bulge, applying pressure to the spinal nerves, causing pain. The back is complex. Once the tissues develop wear and tear, it is very hard to get them to heal. The bottom right photo shows a worker with knee bursitis who spent a lot of time kneeling on a hard floor without the benefit of padding against the floor. This worker's doctor recommended knee joint replacement. Once you have this procedure, it is difficult to kneel. So this worker could not go back to doing the same type of work, at least the way he used to work, by kneeling. Ergonomics is the science to reduce the risk of soft tissue injuries. Since heavy physical demands will cause excess wear and tear on a worker's body, the goal of ergonomics is to fit the job tasks, tools, and environment to meet the physical abilities of the worker. There are several ergonomic hazards that should be considered in each work task because they can make the work too demanding for a worker's body. These hazards are high force, awkward postures, fast prolonged repetition, stress from contact, hand and body vibration, and working in a cold environment. Force is the amount of physical power needed to move an object. It is the most important hazard that causes physical stress or wear and tear on the body. In construction, this often occurs from handling materials. But how much is too much force? It's easy to decide whether something is too heavy for one person to lift if it weighs a lot, such as 200 pounds or more. It is more challenging to decide if one person should lift an object that weighs 100 pounds, or if they should lift an object that weighs 80 pounds and must be carried a long distance, such as to the other side of a building or job site. The National Institute for Occupational Safety and Health, or NIOSH, recommends lifting no more than 50 pounds by one person, which is why airlines charge more if a bag weighs more than 50 pounds. Defining how much is too much for your employees to lift will be helpful for controlling hazards from lifting. How does the weight of the load affect your low back? The weight can be measured through spinal forces in the joints of your low back. In this colorful diagram, the figures to the left is standing upright with no load. The spinal forces from gravity on the low back is 80 inch-pounds. The second figure is holding a 20-pound load close to the body, 10 inches from the hands to the low back. This is an ideal posture to carry a load, and the spinal force goes up to 170 inch-pounds. If the load is moved away from the body to a distance of 20 inches, shown in the third figure from the left, the spinal force increases significantly to 260 inch-pounds. This shows that how close you hold an object in front of your body makes a big difference to your low back forces. The fourth figure shows the large increase in spinal forces from lifting an object from the floor. The distance to the box is larger and the body is not upright. The spinal forces have more than tripled from the ideal figure, changing from 170 inch-pounds to 635 inch-pounds. To reduce physical stress, it's important to keep the load close to the body, consider the vertical location of the materials, and whenever possible, position them at waist height, and limit the weight of what one person can lift and carry without help. Equipment or teams should be used to lift and move materials weighing 50 pounds or more. Your insurance company may have resources available to help you determine the risk for tasks your workers perform. For example, Liberty Mutual has an app that can help gauge the risk and recommend movement modifications to prevent injuries. Awkward posture is another common hazard in construction. The far left picture on the screen, which shows a person working at floor level using a bent forward posture, is an awkward posture that causes increased spinal force. The second photo from the left shows a person kneeling, which causes a contact stress between the hard ground surface and the knee. The other two photos show individuals working overhead and above the shoulder level. Doing overhead work places the body in another poor or awkward posture. Working in this posture decreases a worker's available strength to perform the task and will cause fatigue more quickly. Anytime a worker's hand is positioned above their head height, there is high stress on their shoulders, increasing the risk of a shoulder injury. Other hazards that contribute to risk for soft tissue injuries but may not involve handling materials are highly repetitive tasks, such as repeatedly tightening objects using a wrench, contact stress, hand and body vibration, such as that caused by jackhammering, and working in a cold environment. To address ergonomic hazards and reduce the risk of soft tissue injuries, you need to build an ergonomics program. Your program will help you create a culture focused on ergonomics. The most important ingredients needed to build your program are listed on your screen. First, you must have management commitment. This is not just a commitment to having the company address ergonomics, but a commitment to having management actively participate in developing and implementing the program over time. I want to emphasize a culture cannot change without management showing true commitment, and the effort must be consistent over time. Conducting a one-time toolbox talk or telling workers informally to lift properly is not enough to cause a change. Second, workers must be included in creating and implementing the program. You need their involvement to get their buy-in, to help you identify hazards and related solutions, and to help them understand what you want them to do. They should also help review the progress of the program over time. Third, you must have a plan for creating your program. This should include a company goal for ergonomics and some clear steps to take to achieve your goal. Finally, you should communicate your plan and program to everyone in your company. You should also include several activities from your ergonomics plan that are delivered over time. Building a company ergonomics program and creating an ergonomics culture takes time. You can start by assembling a small team, including representatives from all employee levels, have a meeting to lay out an approach, establish your goal, and develop a schedule and next steps. What should an ergonomics program include? First, your ergonomic goals, the ergonomic hazards you want to address. To establish your goals, you need to consider the most common ergonomic hazards in your company. Once you've set your goals, then you need to develop the 5 key elements of your program. The first element is creating a plan to mitigate the hazards in work tasks. The next 3 elements on the methods to mitigate the tasks. They include defining the work processes or steps for how the work can be done to control the hazards, making sure the proper ergonomic equipment is available, and training employees to ensure they have knowledge and awareness of ergonomic work processes and proper use of equipment. And the last element is engaging in an ongoing review to check to see if the ergonomics program is working as planned. One part of this final element is conducting a final review, a look back at the end of a project to understand what worked well and what did not work as planned, so that lessons learned can be applied to improve future projects. These elements should be systematically applied to every construction project. The hazard identification process will serve as the foundation of the program you develop and should highlight what is of greatest concern or risk in your company. You may identify the ergonomic hazards you want to address in one of the following 3 ways. One approach is to review your OSHA log or injury records to see which tasks or events cause soft tissue injuries. This may not be the best approach for all companies because most companies are too small to have enough injuries to actually see a pattern of cause. Another approach is to conduct an ergonomic hazard assessment of common work tasks. An ergonomic hazards checklist can help. This simple checklist asks you to list the common work tasks, identify ergonomic hazards in each task, and then prioritize the list of hazards to address the highest risk task first. This method is feasible for many companies, but not all. Finally, you may want to consider starting by addressing the task of manual material handling, since this is the most common ergonomic hazard in the construction industry, often associated with 40% of non-fatal injuries. The pre-job checklist shown on this slide is an example of a checklist that can be used to identify manual material handling ergonomic hazards and solutions. Regardless of the approach, you should reach out to your employees to get their input. Once you've identified your goals for the ergonomic hazards, you will be ready to develop the 5 key elements of your ergonomics program, touched on earlier in this presentation and shown on this slide. Most companies will start to build a basic program and include a simple activity or process for each of the key elements listed on the left side of the slide: project and task planning, work practices, equipment, knowledge and awareness, and review. The basic program is applied to the project level activities. This may be done on one or more projects to get started. Over time, you should apply the same program activities or processes to all of your projects. As the ergonomics program begins to grow within your company, the program will become more advanced and then comprehensive. These levels are achieved when a company has created a company-level program and systematically applies the same activities and processes throughout the company and on all projects. This graphic shows examples of activities across all elements of a basic ergonomics program. Project planning tools may include worksheets to help develop ergonomic hazards and solutions to address in a project bid or for pre-job and daily planning of best ergonomic methods and work tasks. Workers are trained on simple ergonomic techniques such as proper lifting and teamwork. Workers are provided with ergonomic PPE such as knee pads or floor movers. And toolbox talks on ergonomic topics are used to increase worker awareness and knowledge. The review element at this stage primarily relies on the ocean log, which is a crude measure of a program's progress at best. As the company's ergonomics program develops and advances, a contractor will monitor planning from what was bid on the job for ergonomic equipment to what was actually used during the project. The program may expand to include policies such as lifting limits and requirements for how to lift loads of different weights manually or by mechanical means. Steps to ensure there is adequate supply of ergonomic equipment, a way to monitor whether or not workers had the ergonomic equipment when needed, and may include an annual budget to purchase a supply of ergonomic equipment, ergonomics training in the new employee orientation, and use of project-written audits that record the use of equipment and work processes to review ergonomic methods. Now let's focus on developing the specific elements of your ergonomics program, starting with elements 1 through 3, which include project planning, work practices, and proper equipment to address the ergonomic hazards. Your plan should define the best ergonomic work practices that will be followed and include finding the best ergonomic tools and equipment. It is important to remember that renting instead of purchasing the tools and equipment may be an option, as well as coming up with solutions of your own. Contractors and workers have developed some excellent work practices for one project that the workers in the same crew continue to use on future projects. Sadly, these ideas are not always picked up by other crews in the same company or adopted by the contractor for use company-wide. Having an ergonomics program that can help you capture these work practices so the company as a whole will benefit. Planning for lifting and moving materials to reduce force and prevent injuries is an essential part of any construction ergonomics program. A first step is to think through how you are going to do the work and what equipment will be needed, the engineering controls. You should consider different aspects of work, including the weight of the load, the size of the load, such as long pipe versus large box materials or loose fittings, the distance to move the load, and the surface to move the load. Although this information may seem like basic knowledge, many workers don't have the proper equipment needed when the material needs to be lifted and moved. That's why involving your construction workers in planning the work is critical. Your plan should include how you will provide your employees with the lifting equipment for the heavier loads and train them on how to use the equipment. This slide shows several examples of lifting equipment. Additional examples can be found in the Best Built Plans program contractor planning tool. You can scan the QR code to retrieve these resources. Since many of these tools are on wheels, it is important to also include the steps for keeping the work area clear of obstacles and debris. In other words, engaging in good housekeeping practices. It is also important to consider the job site layout when planning for how materials will be lifted and moved, where the lifting equipment will be located, and as mentioned on the previous slide, the steps that will be taken to ensure clear paths. Doing so can save time, reduce the risk for injuries, and improve productivity. This slide shows an example of a good work layout. The green line indicates the path a worker would travel to retrieve the equipment and materials and move the materials to the location where they will be installed. This spaghetti chart is a visual way to see how best to move materials and avoid wasted motions and obstacles that likely increase fatigue and risk for injury and reduce productivity. There are a number of solutions or controls that reduce the risk of ergonomic hazards. Some controls reduce the risk better than others. This figure shows the hierarchy of ergonomic controls. The types of controls at the top of the triangle are the best, while the controls at the bottom are the least effective for risk reduction. Eliminating the hazard or substitution that reduces the hazard in the task are the best controls. Engineering controls generally use equipment to reduce the risk. An earlier slide shows examples of types of equipment used to lift and move objects. Scheduling, or what is more commonly called administrative controls, shares the work between workers. Work practice controls are the best methods to perform the task. Examples include using safe lifting techniques or team lifts. PPE and other protective measures is the lowest control that offers the smallest benefit. Examples include knee pads or stretching exercises. If you have no other option, stretching exercises may be helpful. It's important to lay out your plan to address ergonomic hazards based on the hierarchy of controls and to identify controls at each level, because sometimes workers are unable to use the best control and must resort to one that is only good enough. Here is a simple matrix of solutions that could be used for 3 different hazards: manual material handling, work below knee, and arms overhead. If we look at the ergonomic hazard of manual material handling, an engineering control would be to use a mechanical assist. An administrative or scheduling control would be to assign more workers to the task. A work practice control would be to position the material as close as possible to where it will be installed. And an other control would be to stretch before and after the task. Remember to implement engineering controls over all other methods if possible at all times. Next, create a simple form or checklist to list how tasks will be done. This information will be listed in your safety program or on a site-specific safety plan and will need to be communicated to your workforce. This slide shows one example. The Best Built Plans program includes a workbook, individual worksheets, and checklists that you can use and tailor to create your site-specific safety plan. The fourth element of a good ergonomics program is making sure that workers and management have the knowledge and awareness to understand the body's physical abilities and limitations, recognize job-specific ergonomic hazards in work tasks, and identify appropriate controls and work practices to prevent injuries. We have developed a free worker training program for apprentices and other workers that is available for use with your employees. This training program covers basic ergonomic information and lift training techniques and includes a hands-on module, computer and app-based training components, and a refresher model for workers who have received the basic training. It is important that all employees be able to recognize ergonomic hazards so they can plan for solutions. The worker program should be provided not only to workers and foremen, but also to project managers, estimators, and other staff so all are aware of ergonomic hazards and solutions. You can scan the QR code to retrieve this program. To prevent injuries, it is critical to train workers who manually handle materials on proper body mechanics and best practices, including lifting no more than 50 pounds without lifting equipment or help from a coworker, carrying objects no more than 100 feet, and keeping objects weighing more than 25 pounds at waist height. The photos on this slide show good lifting practices. These are photos from the worker training program I just mentioned, and the lifting practices are included in both the presentation and the hands-on portion of the program. The left photo is a two-person lift of two 10-foot pipes, although team lifts can be done with any large, bulky, or heavy material. The right photo shows the steps for lifting a small, heavy object by rolling it up to the waist before standing up. Through proper lift training, you can reduce injuries as long as the weight of the object is reasonable for a worker to lift. The human body has limits, and it will break down over time if too much is expected from the individual's body. The cost of these injuries can be high. Awkward postures are another hazard. It's important to teach your employees about these risks and provide them with equipment such as a cart or stand to assemble materials that they can use to raise the work up and avoid working at floor level on the ground. On this slide, under yes, for example, a jig or pipe stand on a tripod is being used so the worker can work at waist level. Different trades would need to consider other equipment options suitable for their tasks. More examples of equipment to raise materials up to waist level can be found in the Best Built Plans Contractor Planing Tool resources. You can scan the QR code to retrieve these resources. Another awkward posture is reaching up overhead to perform a task. This posture puts extra strain on a worker's shoulders and low back. If your employees are required to perform work overhead, they should be provided with a device such as a lift or ladder to raise them up, and the equipment should be positioned so the work is at or near the worker's head height. The no photo shows a worker reaching overhead. The shoulder angle is greater than 90 degrees. The photos next to yes shows a worker using a taller ladder and a worker using a scissor lift to get closer to the work. Tools with longer handles or extensions can also reduce overhead reaching. Other ergonomic hazards include contact stress and vibration. There are new ergonomically designed tools with lightweight batteries, cushioned handles, or additional handles for better leverage and internal damping for vibration that can reduce exposures. Budgeting at the bid stage for these tools will improve your ergonomics program. The Best Built Plans program, as well as the Choose Hands Safety website, include more examples of tools and equipment that can be used to reduce the ergonomic risks associated with these hazards. Construction workers also suffer from physical stress and fatigue, which impacts their productivity during work. This slide shows two spaghetti chart examples. The first uses a blue line to show a poorly planned work layout. This one requires additional effort, putting the worker at an increased risk for injury. The second one, under yes, is an example of a good work layout. As shown by the green line, this layout reduces the need for wasted motion and pathways are clear, thereby reducing the risk for injury. Ergonomics is focused on reducing hazards and excess physical demands on workers. One common description is to make the demands of the job fit within the worker's ability, because excess demands will tear the bodies down over time. Limiting extra motions will help reduce physical demands. The goal should be to work smarter, not harder, to get the job done. The final element in a good ergonomics program is review. This step allows you to gauge how well your program is working, helps you understand whether modifications are needed while the project is underway, and at the end of the project, provides you with the information you'll need to look back at the project to identify what worked well, what did not work as planned, and what needs to be changed on future projects based on lessons learned. Most contractors rely solely on their OSHA log, injury records, or experience modification rates, their EMR, to assess their program's effectiveness. Although these are commonly collected metrics for business requirements, these lagging indicators are not sensitive to early program improvements or failures. It's best to collect one or more leading indicators. Examples may include tracking of training records, reviewing planning documentation for compliance, or collecting and reviewing discrete worker observations or job site audits. In addition, ask your employees, including the ones performing the work, if the program is working. Engaging your employees will be a sign of management commitment to making improvements and encourage honest and constructive input. Finally, review other materials, including your OSHA log and EMR. Whether you start designing your program to work at the project level or across your entire company, your ergonomics program must follow a process improvement method so it can achieve the results you desire, namely, to reduce soft tissue injuries and increase worker productivity. Many companies use the Plan, Do, Check, Act model as a means to continuously improve their process and create their company-level program. The Plan, Do, Check, Act model shown here is a continuous improvement process improvement method. Your company-level ergonomics program should start with developing a plan to address ergonomic hazards to prevent soft tissue injuries as part of the company's overall safety program. It should include your ergonomic policies, goals, and objectives. Then do your plan. Develop the best ergonomic processes, provide workers with ergonomic equipment, and train workers. Then check periodically. Review your program to assess its effectiveness by conducting work site audits, asking for worker feedback, and reviewing injuries and other indicators. Based on the results from check, you should then act by taking steps to modify the program, retrain workers, and create new activities. By conducting ongoing and final reviews of your projects, a look back, you will be better positioned to identify lessons learned that can be applied to improve future projects. The process improvement method can be repeatedly applied in order to achieve your advanced or comprehensive company-level ergonomics program and reduce risk for injuries. An important part of this process is understanding and applying the hierarchy of controls for manual materials handling. Earlier, we discussed how each level shows the most effective way to reduce risk. This graphic shows how these controls are addressed at different stages of the construction process and examples of the types of people in the organization to involve. The highest levels of control, elimination and substitution in engineering, must be determined early during the bidding and pre-job stage and involve the estimators, project managers, supervisors, and suppliers. While engineering controls can be revisited once work is underway, it's important to plan and budget for them at the bidding stage. As you move down the hierarchy to administrative, these controls are determined during the pre-job and on-the-job stages and involve the project manager, supervisor, and workers. Work practices are determined on the job and involve the project manager, trainer, supervisor, and workers. The lowest level of the hierarchy, PPE and other protective measures, is also determined during the on-the-job stage of construction and involves project managers, supervisors, and workers. As you move down the hierarchy, the effectiveness of the controls decreases, so only controlling manual material handling risks during the on-the-job stage of construction is least effective. How can contractors, including smaller companies who are new to planning around ergonomics, get started using the Plan, Do, Check, Act model and applying the hierarchy of controls to each project stage listed on this slide? The process works the same for large and small-sized contractors, but will likely start at the project level before working into a more advanced plan. The Best Built Plans program that I mentioned earlier, we'll touch on more later, has resources contractors of all sizes can use to develop their plan. Here is a generic example. For your plan, you would want to specify the material and the lifting equipment and/or work practices to be used. At the bid stage, lifting a small load to install is identified, so the bid included funds for the solution to use lifting equipment and team lifts to move the material. During the pre-job stage, the plan is reviewed and updated so steps are in place to ensure the lifting equipment will be delivered to the project when needed, and all workers are trained on using the equipment and team lifting. The team lift could be the focus of a toolbox talk or a hands-on demonstration exercise from the Best Built Plans worker training program. During the on-the-job phase, the work is monitored on a regularly scheduled basis to check that the equipment is available on site and accessible. Workers are using the lifting equipment and proper team lifting, and all workers are trained. Daily or weekly checklists completed and any documentation on training should be returned to your office. The last stage is the review or look back. The plan, checklist, and other documentation are reviewed to assess how well the plan was implemented. The results are discussed with employees and input is solicited to help find solutions for areas where there was low compliance, so the lessons learned can be used on future projects. The Best Built Plans program has resources contractors of all sizes can use to plan for safe materials handling at each project stage to reduce the risk of soft tissue injuries. The full program, which includes interactive training and coaching resources, is available for download to your PC or as an app for Apple and Android devices. The planning resources, plus additional training and educational materials to use with your employees, are also available directly online and in English and Spanish. The Best Built Plans planning tool includes resources and ways to involve everyone in your company, including your employees and trainers, in reducing risk for soft tissue injuries. Some of the materials and resources were specifically designed to help you develop your project level plan, and others were designed to help you implement it. In addition to information on the benefit of reducing manual materials handling, the planning tool includes questions to reduce and steps to take at each project stage, weights of common building materials, and examples of storage options and equipment to reduce the risk when lifting and moving materials. In addition, there are spreadsheets and checklists to help you develop your bid and track what will be needed once work is awarded and underway. And finally, there are training materials that can be used on the job, in a class, and by workers on their own. There's also a video in English and Spanish that walks you through how to create and implement a project-level plan. This slide shows some of the resources to use with your employees. The images on the left show a hazard alert card, toolbox talk, and examples of infographics that can be used as reminders or posters on the job. The toolbox talk includes a QR code that links to the 2 free smartphone games, Lift Coach Plan Your Lift and Lift Coach Plan Your Route, shown on the right side of the slide. Both games were designed to reinforce safe practices. They can be used in a class, or employers can encourage employees to play them after conducting the toolbox talk on safe lifting practices. The games may not appeal to all workers. The idea is to tap into the generations of workers who grew up playing video games and learning online. All of these and other Best Built Plans resources are free and available in English and Spanish. Other organizations have also developed planning resources that can be purchased, such as the ANSI A10.1 standard. In addition to the benefits of developing an ergonomics program already discussed, another benefit of preventing injuries and pain up front is that your employees will not need pain medication. Opioid dependence has become a serious issue for construction employers and their employees because construction workers are at risk for painful work-related injuries, and opioids are commonly prescribed for pain relief. According to the Centers for Disease Control, 1 out of 4 people prescribed opioids for long-term pain become addicted. As shown in the example in the table, a contractor with 100 employees in Missouri would spend over $143,000 annually to cover the costs related to managing those workers with substance use disorders. This would include higher costs from lost time, job turnover, and retraining for terminated employees, and costs for healthcare. You can help address this issue by providing your employees with information on what they can do to protect themselves when they seek treatment for painful conditions. If your employees do get injured, there are resources that you can share with them to ensure they understand that opioids are strong, addictive medications that should only be used if they are prescribed by a doctor and determined to be the best option to manage the pain. Misuse of opioid prescriptions, including taking more than the dose prescribed, taking someone else's prescription, taking multiple opioid medications, or taking high doses for long periods of time, can all lead to opioid dependency and addiction. Before taking the prescription opioids, they should first ask their doctor for information on all available treatments for pain. There may be evidence-based, effective, non-addictive medications or treatments available. Here are a few of the free resources available through CPWR website in a section under Mental Health and Addiction that you can use or share with your employees. The upper three images show a toolbox talk and hazard alert about opioid deaths in construction and prevention, and the cover of one of the materials in the Opioid Awareness Training Program developed for the industry with support from the North American Building Trades Union. The bottom left is an infographic that presents the staggering statistics on the effects of the opioid crisis. And the last document is a physician alert to provide clinicians with advice when treating construction workers for pain. Workers are encouraged to share this document with their doctors. You can scan the QR code to retrieve these and other resources. To recap, a company should develop an ergonomics program because soft tissue injuries, which include strain, sprain, and other overexertion injuries, and are also referred to as musculoskeletal disorders, are very common in the construction industry, cost the industry billions of dollars each year, and are very costly for employers in terms of lost productivity and higher insurance costs. These injuries also lead to chronic pain, and this pain can affect productivity during work, lower worker morale, and negatively impact a worker's quality of life in retirement. They also contribute to another more recent concern, namely the growing problem caused by the treatment of soft tissue injuries with prescription opioid medication. There is new evidence that even short-term opioid use can lead to opioid dependency or addiction. This addiction is costly for workers, employers, and the industry. The annual substance use calculator for a contractor with 100 employees in Missouri, for example, is more than $143,000 annually. Developing an ergonomics program at the company level or starting with a specific project can help your company prevent these painful injuries, reduce the need for pain treatments and risk for addiction, improve productivity, and control insurance and other costs. To build an ergonomics program, find a starting point by identifying the ergonomic hazards on your jobs that you want to address using one or a combination of the following three methods. Review injury data collected from past projects, conduct a hazard assessment of common work tasks performed by your employees, or start with manual materials handling risks. Then use one or more of the 5 key elements to begin developing your ergonomics program to address the ergonomic hazards. The first 3 involve planning to identify the hazards and find interventions, work practices, and tools or equipment to reduce the risk. These are good to use together since any plan should include solutions. It is also important to involve your employees in this process because they can provide valuable insights into the causes of the hazards and ideas for mitigating the risks. It is also important to make sure your training and education that your employees are aware of the hazards and understand how to use the work practices and equipment in your plan to reduce the risk for injuries. And finally, it is important to monitor your plan to ensure it is implemented as intended. In other words, to make sure the tools and equipment are available when your employees need them, and along with work practices are properly used. As part of this step, it's important to look back at the end of the project to understand what worked well or needs to be changed so that you can apply lessons learned on future projects. Following the continuous process improvement plan, do, check, act model shown on this slide will help you develop your program and continuously learn from and improve it. In other words, help you prevent ergonomic injuries on your projects. Again, it is important to involve your employees throughout the process because they can provide important insights into what is working or not working and ways to improve the process and prevent injuries. CPWR's Best Built Plans program provides free resources that can help you develop your project-level plans and build your company-wide ergonomics program. These resources are available at www.bestbuiltplans.org. Finally, be patient. Developing a program and building a culture for your ergonomics program will take time. Please see CPWR's website for these and other projects. Thank you for your time, and thank you from CPWR and the Washington University research team for your efforts to prevent soft tissue injuries and improve the safety and health of the construction workforce.